I married Alex on a foggy Saturday in May, the kind of weather that makes lace look like it's floating. He cried during the vows. I did too. The only dry eyes belonged to his mother, Kristen, who stood rigid as a church pew and whispered to anyone within range, "At least now we can get started on the boy." I pretended not to hear it, because that's what you do on your wedding day, pretend the bone-deep weirdness is just eccentricity sprinkled with champagne. Kristen's house is a shrine to blue. Blue quilts. Blue china. A blue enameled family tree mounted in the hallway like a museum piece, every name a son, uncle, grandfather, cousin. She traced the branches for me once and said, "Our men carry legacy. It's unbroken." I pointed to Alex's name and added, cheerful, "And if we have a girl, she'll be the lightning bolt on this tree." Kristen's smile didn't touch her eyes. "It's not possible," she said, as if correcting a math error. "Girls don't happen to us." The first time I heard "genetically impossible" come out of her mouth, I thought she was joking. The second time, she brought charts, actual printouts, from some website that looked like it was built on dial-up. She tapped a highlighter over a crude Punnett square like a fortune teller reading a palm. "Heirs," she kept saying, gentle as a menace. Alex would squeeze my knee under the table and change the subject to sports. I could feel him splitting in two, husband on one side, son on the other, a wishbone waiting to snap. When I found out I was pregnant, I told Alex first. We danced in our tiny kitchen, tripping over the slick tile, laughing because the world suddenly felt like it was expanding around us. He wanted to wait before telling his mom. I wanted to rip the bandage off. We compromised and told her that weekend at brunch. She brought a present, a box of blue onesies embroidered with air in silver thread. I looked at Alex. He looked at his plate. We did the ultrasound at 12 weeks, and the tech smiled and said, "It's a girl." I cried again, joy this time. Alex kissed my forehead and started listing names like a grocery run. Kristen didn't clap. She didn't blink. She set down her fork and said, sweet as frost, "No, it isn't." She accused the technician of incompetence, claimed machines read what the mother wants, then insisted on a second opinion with her family doctor, a man who used to attend her church and smelled like mothballs. He refused to do an ultrasound at all, muttering about God's design, and Kristen emerged from the exam room triumphant, declaring the baby confirmed male because he'd felt the uterus position. I laughed, then realized she wasn't joking. Alex drove us home in silence. We tried boundaries. We tried logic. We tried switching to a midwife and keeping appointments secret. Kristen responded by dropping off protein shakes for a strong boy, lecturing me about how pink warps the womb, and shaming me for buying a floral swaddle. One night she came over with a framed sonogram photo, someone else's, swearing it was ours corrected. That was our first big fight. Mine, really. Alex froze, old muscle memory. A week later, while grabbing a spare charger at Kristen's, I opened the wrong drawer. Inside was a small velvet pouch. I wouldn't have looked twice, but it rattled like coins. I poured the contents into my palm, 2 tiny hospital bracelets, faded and cracked. Both pink. Both with the same last name as Kristen's maiden name. 2 different dates. 2 different baby girls. When Kristen found me holding them, her face did something I'd never seen, unclenched and then hardened like glass cooling too fast. "Those aren't yours to touch," she said. I asked whose they were. She smiled the way people smile when there's a cliff behind you. "Relics," she said. "And you, Emma, should learn to keep your hands off the past." After I found the bracelets, I couldn't stop thinking about them. The names were smudged, but you could still make out baby girl. Same hospital, years apart. Both tucked away like contraband jewelry. I wanted to shake Alex and scream, "Do you know about this?" But when I told him, he just rubbed his temples and muttered, "My mom keeps weird stuff. Don't make it bigger than it is." Bigger than it is? His mother had a stash of baby bracelets like war medals, and we were supposed to pretend it was normal? I dropped it for the sake of my sanity, or I tried to. Pregnancy made my brain hyper-focused, everything sharp and magnified. When our daughter, Lily, was born, Kristen came to the hospital wearing a navy blazer like she was attending a board meeting. She held Lily for exactly 30 seconds, then thrust her back into my arms as if the baby were defective merchandise. "She doesn't look like Alex," she announced. "She's darker." For the record, Lily had jet black hair, just like Alex as a newborn. But that was the moment it shifted. Kristen's obsession with no girls in our family twisted into something uglier. She began calling me the girl who tricked my son. I overheard her once on the phone saying, "She's made a fool of him. That child can't be ours." At first, Alex brushed it off. "She's dramatic," he'd sigh. "Ignore her." But then came the DNA test kit she mailed to our house, just to be safe. I threw it in the trash, but the seeds were planted. 6 months later, I found out I was pregnant again. I was terrified to tell Kristen, but Alex insisted it would be different this time. Spoiler, it wasn't. When the doctor confirmed it was another girl, Kristen lost it. She showed up uninvited at our house, stormed into the nursery, and started ripping the pink sheets off the crib like she was exorcising demons. "You're humiliating my family," she spat at me, eyes wild. "2 girls? That's impossible. Unless you've been spreading your legs for someone else." I'd never been slapped before. The sound cracked through the room louder than the pain itself. Alex shoved her away and shouted like I'd never heard him shout, but by then my stomach was twisting so violently I couldn't breathe. We ended up in the ER that night. I was hooked to monitors, heart racing, clutching my belly while doctors whispered about stress-induced contractions. And then came the police. Because a nurse asked the right questions. Because the handprint was still glowing on my face. Kristen spent the night in a holding cell while I lay in a hospital bed wondering how my life had turned into a soap opera. Alex cried at my bedside. "I'll cut her off, I swear. No more." But his words sounded fragile, like paper promises. When we got home, I couldn't stop thinking about those hospital bracelets. About the way Kristen said relics. About her absolute conviction that girls couldn't exist in their bloodline. And I thought, what if she wasn't delusional? What if she was hiding something? So while Kristen was out on bail, ranting to anyone who would listen about my affair, I started digging. And what I found made my blood run cold. My search started small. Old public records, dusty hospital registries, anything I could pull without raising alarms. I had 2 clues, the bracelets. Dates years before Alex was born, names too faded to read fully. But one bracelet was from 1986, the other from 1989. I requested birth certificates. The clerk gave me a look when I handed over Kristen's maiden name, but within a week, 2 thin envelopes arrived in our mailbox. Inside, confirmation. Kristen had delivered 2 daughters, not just pregnancies, not just complications like she sometimes hinted at. Actual baby girls. Both at the same hospital where Lily was born. And both vanished from the record after a few days. No death certificates. No adoption papers in the system. Just, gone. I confronted Alex first. I'll never forget his face when I slid the documents across the table. He kept repeating, "No, no, no," like a scratched CD. Finally he whispered, "She always said she had miscarriages before me." He looked at the certificates again, and his voice broke. "She lied about being my mother's firstborn." That night, we didn't sleep. I Googled everything I could about closed adoptions in the 80s, about forged records. It was like pulling at a loose thread, the more I tugged, the more everything unraveled. I tracked one lead to a church charity that handled discreet adoptions. A dusty ledger from 1986 listed baby girl S, beside a pastor's signature. A second entry in 1989, baby girl S, repeat client. Same mother's name. Same doctor. Kristen had given both daughters away. I wanted to scream. To break something. Instead, I gathered everything: certificates, adoption logs, old census records, and made a folder. I kept it hidden even from Alex at first, because I needed to be sure before crushing him with more truth. But here's the twist I didn't see coming. A week later, I got a call from a woman named Jessica. She said she was researching her biological family, and my number came up connected to some documents she'd requested through the same archive. My heart stopped. Jessica was 36. She'd been adopted at 2 weeks old. Her mother's name? Kristen. I met her at a coffee shop. Same blue eyes as Alex. Same stubborn chin. She pulled out her phone and showed me a picture of another woman, her younger sister, born 3 years after her. Another girl given up. I almost dropped my cup. It was the second bracelet. Jessica had grown up believing her mother was too young to raise her. She never knew that her birth mom built an entire mythology around no girls allowed. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "If what you're telling me is true, she erased us. She built her life pretending we didn't exist." And then she added, "I want a DNA test. I want to prove it. Will you help me?" My stomach churned, but I said yes. Because suddenly, it wasn't just about protecting Lily or my unborn daughter. It was about exposing Kristen's whole lie. That night, I told Alex everything. Every scrap of paper, every conversation. He sat in silence for a long time, then whispered, "She destroyed their lives. And she almost destroyed ours." For the first time, I saw him hate his mother. But the story didn't end there. Because Jessica wasn't the only ghost coming back. Helping Jessica felt like stepping onto a roller coaster I couldn't get off. She was determined, almost scarily calm, like she'd been preparing her whole life for this confrontation. She ordered 2 DNA kits, one for herself, one for her younger sister, Rachel. I ordered one for Alex and one for Lily. It was the only way to cut through the fog of lies. We met up in secret, in the corner of a public library where nobody would bother us. Jessica handed me her kit, Rachel's tucked safely in her bag. "You sure he'll do it?" she asked. I nodded, though in truth I wasn't sure at all. Alex was torn between rage and grief. The thought of spitting into a plastic tube to confirm his mother's betrayal made him nauseous. But when I brought the kit home, he didn't argue. He just sighed, rolled up his sleeves like he was about to shovel a driveway, and did it. The waiting nearly killed me. Kristen kept calling during that time, sometimes crying, sometimes ranting. She showed up once at our doorstep with a Bible in hand, swearing she'd pray the demons of deception out of me. Alex refused to let her in. From inside, I heard her scream through the door, "That baby isn't mine. Neither of them are mine." It was like she already knew the walls were closing in. 3 weeks later, the results came in. I opened the email alone at first, my hands trembling so badly I could hardly click. And there it was. Jessica, half-sister to Alex. Rachel, half-sister to Alex. Lily, 99.9% Alex's daughter. I cried so hard I startled Lily awake from her nap. Relief, fury, vindication, all of it tangled together. When I showed Alex, he sat at the table for nearly an hour, staring at the screen. Finally, he whispered, "She lied to me my entire life. Lied to them. Lied to everyone." Then louder, "She made me believe something impossible. She hated my daughters for being what she threw away." We decided not to go to Kristen privately. Too much had already happened behind closed doors. Instead, Jessica wanted the truth public. She'd spent decades wondering why her mother had erased her. She deserved to confront her directly. So we planned it. Jessica and Rachel agreed to meet Alex at a neutral spot, a community center downtown. Neutral walls, neutral chairs, no weapons for Kristen to brandish when she inevitably exploded. But Kristen found out before we could tell her. I'll never know how. Maybe she tracked Alex's phone, maybe someone in the family tipped her off. Either way, she burst into the community center like a hurricane, hair wild, eyes red, holding a leather-bound photo album she slammed down on the table. "You think you've discovered something new," she spat. "I chose the life I wanted. I chose the son who could carry the line. Those girls," she pointed at Jessica and Rachel like they were ghosts, "were mistakes. Do you understand? Mistakes." The room went ice cold. Rachel started shaking. Jessica stared her down like steel. "You can call us mistakes all you want," Jessica said, her voice steady. "But DNA doesn't lie. We are your daughters. And we're done being erased." For a moment, Kristen's face crumpled, almost human. But then she screamed, actually screamed, so loud the center staff called the police. It wasn't the first time officers had taken her away. But it was the first time she didn't look victorious. She looked small. And for the first time in years, Alex looked free. When the police dragged Kristen out of the community center, clutching her photo album like a shield, the silence she left behind was deafening. Jessica's hands shook as she packed up her purse. Rachel was pale as paper, and Alex sat slumped forward, like someone had just carved out a piece of his chest. But something had shifted. For the first time, the lies weren't hidden anymore. There were witnesses, there were records, and now there were two living, breathing sisters standing right in front of him. The next day, Kristen's meltdown made its way through the family grapevine. By the time we woke up, Alex's phone was buzzing nonstop, uncles, cousins, even a great-aunt in Florida, all asking what the hell had happened. Alex didn't answer at first, but finally he called a family Zoom meeting. I swear, it felt like we were about to present evidence in a courtroom. We laid it all out. The birth certificates. The adoption records. The DNA results. Jessica and Rachel even joined the call, though Rachel kept her camera off. The silence from the other relatives was heavy, then erupted into a storm of disbelief, anger, and questions. "Why would she hide them?" one cousin demanded. "She told us she only ever wanted one child," said another. "She told me she miscarried 3 times," an aunt whispered, looking betrayed. The biggest blow came from Alex's grandmother, Kristen's own mother, who sat quietly the whole time, then finally said, "I knew about the first baby. I begged her to keep her. But Kristen, she said girls would ruin everything. I never knew there were 2. Her voice cracked. "My God, what have we done?" It was like watching a bomb go off in slow motion. Kristen's whole narrative, her obsession with "no girls in our bloodline," collapsed in front of everyone. And instead of rallying behind her, the family began circling around Jessica and Rachel, apologizing, asking questions, offering connection. Meanwhile, Kristen was still calling Alex's phone from her temporary hold. Each voicemail more frantic than the last. "Don't let them poison you against me. They're lying, Alex. They're not your sisters. You're my only child, don't abandon me." He deleted them all without listening past the first sentence. But here's where the unexpected happened. Jessica and Rachel didn't want revenge. They wanted family. Jessica especially. She showed up at our house a week later with a stuffed giraffe for Lily and a stack of old adoption papers she thought Alex should have. Watching Alex hold his half-sister's hand, tears in his eyes, was like watching a wound begin to close. Rachel was slower, hesitant, but eventually she joined too, drawn in by Lily's giggles and the warmth of our little household. We started having dinners together, just us and them, no drama, no lies. For the first time, family felt bigger, fuller, alive. Of course, Kristen didn't stay quiet. When she got out, she tried to show up at our door again. This time Alex didn't freeze. He stepped outside, blocking her path, and said the words I never thought I'd hear from him. "You're not welcome here. Not until you accept my daughters. All of them." Kristen's face twisted like she'd been slapped. She spat something about betrayal and stalked off. Watching her walk away, clutching her photo album like it could save her, I realized something. She'd built her whole identity around sons and heirs, but the legacy she left behind wasn't a tree full of men. It was the daughters she'd abandoned, and the family she'd nearly destroyed. And now? We were rewriting the family tree ourselves. By the time I hit my third trimester, things had calmed on the surface. Jessica and Rachel were coming over every other weekend. Lily had two brand new aunts who spoiled her with second-hand toys and bedtime stories, and Alex seemed lighter, as if shedding the weight of Kristen's lies gave him permission to breathe again. But peace in our house only made Kristen more desperate. She started showing up at church potlucks, crying about how her ungrateful children had been brainwashed. She mailed letters, actual handwritten ones, telling Alex he was under my witch's spell. And then came the kicker: she tried to file for grandparents' rights. When the paperwork landed in our mailbox, my stomach dropped. She was demanding legal visitation with Lily and any future children, claiming I was alienating her. I nearly ripped the pages in half. Alex called our lawyer the same day. Here's where fate threw us a wild card: the lawyer happened to know Jessica. She'd been a client years earlier when she petitioned for her sealed adoption records. When she heard Jessica's name, she asked if she'd be willing to testify. Jessica didn't even hesitate. If she's going to fight for access to your daughters, Jessica said, then she should answer for the daughters she abandoned. Court was brutal. Kristen strutted in with her Bible, her fake genealogical charts, and a parade of church friends who swore she was a saint. But when Jessica and Rachel took the stand, everything cracked. Jessica's testimony was fire, measured, calm, devastating. She laid out the DNA results, the adoption papers, the lies. Rachel, quieter but raw, talked about growing up wondering why her mother didn't want her. The judge listened, stone-faced, as Kristen shrieked that these so-called daughters were imposters. The final blow came from Alex himself. He looked his mother in the eye and said, voice shaking but steady, "You gave them away. You tried to erase them. And now you want my girls? No. My daughters will grow up knowing love, not shame. And they'll know their aunts. That's the family we're building, with or without you." The ruling was swift. Kristen's petition was denied. Permanently. The judge even suggested she seek counseling. Kristen stormed out, slamming the courtroom doors so hard they echoed. It was over. Finally, completely over. That night, as I lay in bed with Lily snuggled against me and Alex's hand resting on my swollen belly, I realized Kristen had lost everything she fought so hard to control. And in her place, we'd built something stronger: truth, sisters reunited, daughters cherished. But there was still one chapter left to write: the arrival of our second baby girl. The last weeks of pregnancy were a blur of swollen ankles, midnight cravings, and Lily trying to help by dragging diapers to the bassinet. Jessica and Rachel practically moved in during that time. They cooked meals, painted the nursery, and argued over which songs would make the best lullabies. For the first time in months, I felt safe. Cocooned. Like this baby was coming into a fortress instead of a battlefield. On a rainy Thursday night, my contractions started. Jessica drove while Alex held my hand in the back seat, whispering encouragement through every wave of pain. Rachel stayed with Lily. By the time we reached the hospital, I was already 6 centimeters. Everything moved fast. Too fast. And then she was here. Another girl. Healthy, screaming, perfect. I sobbed into Alex's chest, overwhelmed by relief. Jessica was the first visitor allowed in. She leaned over the hospital bed, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "She's beautiful. She looks like you." That's when the name conversation began. We'd made lists, crossed them out, made new ones, but nothing stuck. Alex stared down at our tiny daughter, then looked at Jessica. "I think we already know her name," he said softly. Jessica blinked. "What do you mean?" "You," he said simply. "You were the first truth in all of this. You're the proof my daughters belong. She should carry your name." Jessica's lips parted like she wanted to argue, but then she broke down, covering her face with her hands. "You can't," she started, but Alex cut her off. "We can. And we will. Jessica." He kissed the baby's forehead. "Jessica Marie. The room fell silent. Heavy, sacred. I nodded through my tears because it felt right, like we were stitching the broken pieces of this family into something new. When Rachel heard, she cried too, saying, "Now there will always be a Jessica in this family who's wanted." It wasn't lost on me that Kristen's impossible girls were now the namesakes and caretakers of the future she tried to erase. A week later, we brought baby Jessica home. The house was bursting with flowers, casseroles from neighbors, balloons tied to the porch. Lily tiptoed into the living room and peeked into the bassinet. "Baby sissy," she whispered, kissing her sister's tiny hand. But as blissful as it felt, I knew Kristen wouldn't stay silent forever. She'd already lost the courts, her lies, her grip on Alex, but she hadn't lost her hunger for control. Sure enough, 2 nights later, we got a letter. Hand-delivered. No return address. It was short, written in Kristen's jagged handwriting. "You can name her after the ghosts all you want. But blood remembers. And blood always comes home." Alex tore it in half without reading it aloud to me, but I'd already feel it in my gut. Kristen wasn't done. It was a Sunday afternoon. Lily was coloring on the porch, Jessica napping in her bassinet beside me, when I saw the car pull up. The old Buick. Kristen got out, clutching that same leather photo album like it was the Ark of the Covenant. I yelled for Alex. He came running, but Kristen was already halfway up the walkway. "Give me 5 minutes," she shouted, her voice hoarse. "I just want to see my granddaughters. That's all." "You lost that right," Alex said firmly, blocking the steps. She ignored him and turned to me, eyes blazing. "Emma, don't you see? You've stolen my son, poisoned my family, and now you're parading those girls like trophies. You're destroying the legacy I built." My blood boiled. I'd swallowed her insults, endured her obsession, even stayed silent when she raised her hand to me. But now, standing there with both my daughters under my roof, I felt a fire I didn't know I had. "No, Kristen," I said, stepping past Alex. "You destroyed your legacy the day you abandoned your daughters. You lied. You manipulated. You tried to erase them, and then you tried to erase mine. But guess what? They're here. All of them. And they're loved. By us. By each other. You don't get to rewrite that anymore." She dropped the album. Photos spilled across the porch. Among them were Jessica's and Rachel's newborn photos, tucked in like shameful secrets. Kristen sank to her knees, clutching her head, muttering, "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I was supposed to have sons. Only sons." Alex's voice was sharp, final. "You had daughters. You threw them away. And now you've lost all of us." The neighbors were watching by then, some filming on their phones. Kristen must have realized it, because she scrambled up, gathered what photos she could, and stumbled back to her car. She drove off without another word. That was the last time she ever showed up at our house. After Kristen's breakdown on our porch, something remarkable happened: the silence. For months, our lives had been consumed by her constant interference, calls, letters, accusations, court threats. But when she drove away that day, it was as though someone turned off the static. For the first time, our home belonged to us. Jessica and Rachel became regular fixtures in our lives. Jessica would swing by after work to cook dinner and tell Lily wild stories about her childhood, filling the air with laughter that drowned out old memories of Kristen's venom. Rachel, quieter but steady, often came over just to sit with baby Jessica, rocking her for hours, humming lullabies she swore she didn't even remember learning. It was healing, watching them learn how to be aunts, how to step into roles that had been denied to them for decades. The extended family surprised us too. Cousins, uncles, even that great-aunt in Florida. Slowly, they reached out. Some apologized for not questioning Kristen sooner. Others confessed they'd always felt something off about her obsession with sons but never dared to speak up. For the first time, the family tree wasn't blue-tinted and one-sided, it was alive, growing, layered with truth instead of propaganda. One night, after putting both girls to bed, Alex and I sat on the porch with Jessica and Rachel. Fireflies blinked in the yard, cicadas humming in the background. Alex raised his glass of sweet tea and said, "To the family we chose. And to the family we found." Jessica clinked her glass against his. Rachel smiled, small but real. And for the first time in years, Alex looked at peace. In the months that followed, life blossomed. Jessica and Rachel became godmothers to both girls. Alex started therapy, finally unpacking the years of manipulation. I went back to school part-time, something Kristen had once sneered at as a distraction from heirs. We named baby Jessica's first birthday cake with a single phrase, "To daughters." It wasn't just for her. It was for every girl Kristen tried to erase. Looking back now, I realize Kristen's greatest fear came true. She thought daughters would ruin everything. But in the end, they saved us. They built a family where lies once lived. And maybe the saddest part, the part one don't like admitting, is that Kristen could have been part of it. She could have been a grandmother, a mother, someone loved instead of feared. But by the time she reached for us, the door had already closed. And honestly, that's exactly how it needed to be.